Welcome to Surrender School. The Gifts of Imperfection book study. Session 3. All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for showing up again. Love to see your faces. I thought this was a great chapter. She has quite a poetic way of saying things, and I really appreciate her writing. This chapter, for me, anyway, was, she's talking about exploring the power of love, belonging, and being enough. And perfectionism, for me, ensures that I will never feel lovable. I will never feel like I belong, and I will never feel like I'm enough. And so it was interesting the way that she talked about this stuff. The very first thing, the very first paragraph for old book is top of 23, new book is page 32, where she says, love and belonging are essential to the human experience. I realized that only one thing separated the men and women who felt a deep sense of love and belonging from the people who seemed to be struggling for it. That one thing, here it is again, that one thing is the belief in their worthiness. It's as simple and complicated as this. If we want to fully experience love and belonging, we must believe that we are worthy of love and belonging. And again, it's that word, and it keeps popping up again and again and again in what she writes, and that's worthiness. And I don't know about you, but for me, my worthiness was always tied to my weight, to my appearance, all of that crap. Really nothing that has anything to do really with worthiness. It was all just appearance and how I looked and what I weighed. And that's, first of all, that was crappy. I never felt worthy. And what a shallow definition of worthiness as a human being that I had for decades. That somehow that actually was the measure of my worth, was how I looked. Ugh. I hate to admit that, but all right. Okay, then the next thing that she talks about is old book, bottom of page 23, new book, bottom of 32, top of 33. When we can let go of what other people think and own our story, we gain access to our worthiness, the feeling that we are enough just as we are, and that we are worthy of love and belonging. When we spend a lifetime trying to distance ourselves from the parts of our lives that don't fit with who we think we're supposed to be, we stand outside of our story and hustle for our worthiness by constantly performing, perfecting, pleasing, and proving. And we spent a ton of time talking about that in the last book study on emotional sobriety, and how, Alan Berger talked about our emotional dependency was outside of ourselves. Here, what she's talking about is worthiness, and our sense of worthiness is out there. And if we don't get that sense from out there, then we're not worthy. And what she's saying is we have to own our own worthiness and give ourselves our own worthiness. Now, I will tell you, I don't know about you, but letting go of what other people think has been a lifetime process for me. It has been incredibly difficult for me. And it got in the way of my recovery in this program, because I kept trying to do what everybody else said was the right thing to do instead of listening to my own heart, listening to my own spirit, listening to my own higher power. And I wanted to belong. I wanted to be a part of. And that really got in the way of my recovery. And so I didn't really step into recovery until I was able to let that little piece of what other people thought of me go. Like it was okay if I did program my own way, and found the way that the steps worked for me. Whether anybody thought I was crazy or nuts or whatever, didn't matter. I was going to do what my higher power was telling me to do. So that was my first little piece of letting go what people think of me. And now I'm working at trying to let go of that in other areas of my life. And I will tell you that one of the beautiful things about the fellowship is that when we come in, other people do begin to tell us, and we get messages that we are worthy. And when we try program and we try some of this stuff, we develop a sense of worthiness inside ourselves. So program is very important in this process. I mean, and it is other people outside of us doing it for us until we can do it ourselves. Okay. All right. Next section is old book, top of page 24, new book, mid page 33. The greatest challenge for most of us is believing that we are worthy now, right this minute. Worthiness doesn't have prerequisites. And that sounded like an oxymoron to me to begin with, because worthiness always had prerequisites in my house growing up. And I still live with a lot of those prerequisites today. One of the biggest ones, of course, was my weight and my appearance. And another one was making other people happy at the sacrifice of myself. That was another prerequisite, that their needs had to be more important than my needs. So I want to start challenging the validity of those prerequisites, because I had a whole list. I mean, she lists out, her whole list of all these things that she'll be worthy when. And I think it's an interesting thing to take into prayer and meditation to look at, what are your prerequisites for worthiness? Worthiness in program, worthiness in all the different areas of your life. What are those? How are we holding back that sense of worthiness from ourselves by our prerequisites? I thought that was a great way of putting that. Next thing I want to talk about is old book, very last line on page 24. New book is mid-page 34. When's the last time you had a serious conversation with someone about the meaning of love? What? That is such a great question. A program talks about it, and we learn about it from interacting with others in program. I think one of the coolest societal experiments that the 12 steps have done is bringing a whole group of really diverse people together with lots of different beliefs, lots of different lives. And we all come into this room for the same solution. And we all manage to love each other. I mean, it's a perfect practice of love, and we learn to love each other. We learn to accept each other, and hopefully eventually we learn to do that for ourselves. But I think that's part of the magical process of program, or at least it was for me. The next point is old book is mid-page 25. New book is the top of page 35. One of the biggest surprises in this research was learning that fitting in and belonging are not the same thing. And in fact, fitting in gets in the way of belonging. This one kind of blew my hair back. Fitting in is about assessing a situation and becoming who you need to be accepted. Belonging, on the other hand, doesn't require us to change who we are. It requires us to be who we are. I think OA and other food recovery groups are probably some of the few places I actually do feel like I belong. You know, and I actually really want to take a closer look at this issue for me, because I actually used to brag that I was a chameleon. I could fit in with any group. Just tell me who you want me to be and I'll be it. And as a result, you know, I wound up being 40 years old and I had no freaking idea who I was. I was so busy being whatever it is other people wanted me to be. So through program and through really the inventory process, I began to figure out who I was and who I wasn't, and what fit and what didn't fit for me. It's important in program to give others the respect of belonging and not demanding that they fit in by conforming to what our definition of program is, what our definition of abstinence is, what our definition of a food plan is. There can be a lot of rules in some of these rooms, and I think it's really important for us, again, to open up our hearts and help people to feel like they belong, whether they fit in or not. Next point is on page, it's still mid 25 for the old book and mid to top of 36 for the new book. And she gives us what she says is one of the biggest, oh wait, no, I already did that. Okay, this is her truths about love and belonging. And she gives a list of them. And so I'm just going to talk about those briefly. The first one is love and belonging will always be uncertain. We simply cannot accurately measure them. I don't know about you, but that causes me some anxiety. I want to know that I fit in. I want to know that I belong. I mean, since I always felt like I didn't belong, it was one of my main goals, was to belong. And the fact that it's always uncertain and you never know when you go into a meeting, whether you go into any other kind of social situation, whether you're going to belong or not. I don't like that one, but I agree with it, but I don't like it. The next truth, she says, is love belongs with belonging. When emotions or experiences are so tightly woven together that people's stories, that they don't speak of one without the other, it's not an accidental entanglement, it's an intentional knot. And that was in her research. When people talked about love, they talked about belonging. And she saw those two things as completely interwoven, and that you really can't have love without belonging or belonging without love. Now, that's an interesting thought. The next truth, or her last truth, is a deep sense of love and belonging is an irreducible need of all women, men, and children. And that was one of the things that Alan Berger said in his emotional sobriety stuff, was that is a absolute deep survival need, just like food, shelter, and clothing is for people, for humans. And that causes a lot of problems for us when we grow up or live in places where we don't belong, where we feel where we feel we don't fit in or we don't belong. And that's really important. And the fact that it's an irreducible need. I've been thinking a lot about belonging, love, and my higher power. And I think I really started playing around with the love and belonging concepts with my higher power, because I felt completely safe with my higher power. So that relationship was really important for me I started there, and it was really important for me to be willing to experiment in other areas of my life. So that relationship was really critical for me to be willing to put myself out there. I don't know if anybody else has had that kind of experience with their higher power, but it was very powerful for me. Next thing I want to talk about is an old book, kind of the top third of page 26, and the new book, it's on page 36. The absence of love and belonging will always lead to suffering. That was what my eating behavior and my disease was trying to remedy, was that absence, those absences in my life. That's what I was trying to use to cope with that stuff. And it was intense suffering. And unfortunately, what I used to cope with it only brought more suffering. It felt good for a little while, but it only brought more suffering. Further down on the page, okay, she's going to give us her definition of love. Okay. And I thought this was an absolutely beautiful definition. So it's mid-page 26, old, mid-page 36, new. We cultivate love when we allow our most vulnerable and powerful selves to be deeply seen and known. And when we honor the spiritual connection that grows from that offering with trust, respect, kindness, and affection. Love is not something we give or get. It is something that we nurture and grow. A connection that can only be cultivated between two people when it exists within each one of them. We can only love others as much as we love ourselves. Shame, blame, disrespect, betrayal, and the withholding of affection damage the roots from which love grows. Love can only survive these injuries if they are acknowledged, healed, and rare. Okay. Essentially what she's saying is love is not transactional. Okay. And one of my favorite OA readings, I can't remember if it was in the For Today book, but it was about, I love you, whether you love me or not, it's irrelevant. That was the first time that notion had ever come into my consciousness, was when I read it in the For Today book. But I feel like that's what she's saying here. And the other important thing I think she's saying here is that it's not a one and done thing. Again, it's a process. I keep bumping into that. And, pretty soon I'm probably going to get pretty mad about it, but because I want some things to be done, darn it. But again, love is something that is nurtured and grown, and it's a give and it's a take. It's not okay, I'm going to love you and then you'll love me back and it's all sunshine and roses. Again, it's a growth process that is an integral part of love. And that if things go awry, because they will, because we're human beings, that we have to acknowledge these, we have to heal them, and we have to stop repeating them. Gosh, doesn't that sound like program? Doesn't that sound like the steps and what we do in our step work? Okay. Next, she goes into the definition of belonging. Bottom of page 26 for the old, top of page 37 for the second edition. Belonging is the innate human desire to be part of something larger than us. Because this yearning is so primal, we often try to acquire it by fitting in and by seeking approval, which are not only hollow substitutes for belonging, but often barriers to it. Because true belonging only happens when we present our authentic, imperfect selves to the world. Our sense of belonging can never be greater than our level of self-acceptance. And I see now why program fosters such a feeling of belonging. We bring our deepest imperfection, our disease, and we share it with the other people in this program. To me, my disease and my eating behavior and what I did with food was my most shameful part of myself. And I would walk into these rooms and I would tell these strangers about it. And they didn't run away screaming. In fact, most of them would nod their heads like, yeah, I did that too. Yeah, I can relate to that. That was the most beautiful feeling of belonging that I'd ever had in my life when I first came into these rooms 30 years ago. Next thing I want to read is top of page 27 in the old and on page 37 in the second edition. Because loving them and accepting their imperfections is much easier than turning that light of loving kindness on myself. I'm shocked at how true this statement has been for me. It is so much easier to accept and even cherish the imperfections and quirks of the people that I love than to accept and embrace my own. And program has helped me learn to love and be kind to myself. And you know how it happened? It happens when we get into these rooms and we share with each other our quirks and our imperfections, and we get to laugh about it. And we get to have a sense of humor about it. And that kind of modeling taught me to be able to have a sense of humor about my own and not think it was such a disaster. And now there are times when I will literally giggle when I catch myself doing something stupid, and it becomes not a source of shame anymore, but just a source of laughter and like this is going to be a good story to tell, to my sponsees in a meeting, whatever. So I think program's been really instrumental in helping me do that. Next thing is just a few lines down from where we were. In the next paragraph, practicing self-love means learning how to trust ourselves, to treat ourselves with respect, and to be kind and affectionate toward ourselves. That's a pretty tall order. I'm doing this one little win at a time. One little change at a time. I'll notice when I do something stupid and I don't start that tape of berating myself over it. And I'll notice it. And that's a win. I'll notice that someone will do something, like I'm in the middle of a step 10, someone will have done something. I've got an emotional reaction about it. And instead of opening my mouth and saying something right away, I'll do a quick step 10 and I'll be able to keep my mouth shut. That's one little win at a time. And I begin to trust myself. I begin to trust that I can change. I begin to trust maybe I can do this recovery stuff. I begin to trust that I am capable of recovery. It took me a few decades to really believe that I was capable of recovery in this program. It took, unfortunately, a 20+ year relapse really made me believe I wasn't. But it's these little teeny wins that I rack them, stack, and then I begin to trust myself again. Next thing, bottom third of page 27 in the old edition, and it's the top of page 38 in the new edition. She says, given how difficult it is to cultivate self-acceptance in our perfectionist society, and how our need for belonging is hardwired, it's no wonder that we spend our lives trying to fit in and gain approval. From gangs to gossiping, we'll do what it takes to fit in if we believe it will meet our need for belonging. But it doesn't. We can only belong when we offer our most authentic selves and when we're embraced for who we are. Okay, I have spent a lifetime trying to fit in, thinking that if I could, then I would be loved. But it's a lie, because any affection I received after contorting myself to fit in isn't about love for me. It's about love for this pretzel that contorted herself into something that she wasn't. So it wasn't even love for me. It was love for this false image that I was presenting, this false facade I was presenting. And think about it. Think about this perfectionist society we live in. Instagram can make you feel suicidal. I mean, the visions of perfection that we are pummeled over the head with every day now, particularly physical perfection. Nothing is worse for me than seeing a 60-year-old perfect body in a bikini in a post. Really? Really? You know, and I'm smart enough to know that all of it's been airbrushed, all of it's been filtered to death. I know it's not true. I know it. But it gets in our heads, that perfectionist stuff. Like, you know, I've lost 80 pounds. I have lots of loose skin. I have rolls that will never go away without surgery. It's not going to happen. And I try, you know, one of my friends in program one time called it her role of acceptance. And I loved it. I loved it. And that's why I talk to my role of acceptance when I get self-critical of the way my body looks. I talk to my role of acceptance. I apologize to my role of acceptance, because you know what? My body still works after all of that. And that's pretty darn amazing. And perfection, if there is such a thing in our bodies, you don't have it at 60. Sorry. So I cringe sometimes when I see that stuff. I absolutely cringe. Okay. Next thing I want to talk about, she talks about practicing love and belonging. And it's on the first third of page 28 in the old edition. And it's on the top of page 39 in the second edition. It's also pushed me to think about the important differences between professing love and practicing love. Okay, that is something I hadn't thought about before. It kind of blew my hair back. And I practice love by loving everyone in the room, period. Steps 4 through 9 help me to do this. Program is the perfect place to practice. It's the perfect place to make mistakes because it's a place where we allow each other to make amends to each other. We're allowed to make mistakes in these rooms. So it's a perfect place to practice anything, but it's a great place to practice love. But there's a big difference between saying you love someone and acting like you love someone. And I think that we are taught in program how to act like we love someone. We're used to saying things. I mean, addicts are really used to saying things, saying whatever it is the other person wants to hear to get them off your back so you can go indulge in the substance. But actually practicing and acting like you love someone is different. And I think we have to always remember that practicing means you're going to make mistakes. Practicing means you'll have successes and you will have failures, and that it's okay because it's actually authentic love. Or at least that's the way I'm looking at it. That's the way I'm going to choose to look at it today. Okay, last thing I want to talk about. It's the next to last thing, sorry. It's where she says the question, it's in bold, can we love others more than we love ourselves? Page 28, page 39. Can we love others more than we love ourselves? I don't know. You know, I think about it, and I think about the people in my life that I love deeply. And do I love them more than myself? And I know she's making an argument here, and maybe I'm not smart enough to figure it out as much, but I do believe that people love others more than they love themselves, love their family members, their spouses, their kids, their parents, their siblings, whatever. But if you think about it, do we have conditions on those love, on that love for our spouse, our kids? Do we withhold that love if they do something we don't want them to do? Act in a way we don't want them to act? Say something we don't want them to say? So I think I'm trying to see this, and I don't see it as clearly in my life, but I'm trying to see this, that as long as I have conditions that I beat myself up with for myself, then I am going to have conditions on the others in my life that I love. And if I can learn to love myself without conditions, without being perfect, without, being what everyone says you're supposed to be, if I can love myself that way, then maybe that opens the door for me being able to love the other people in my life without conditions. And I think that's an ideal we work towards. I'm not sure we ever get there, but I think it's an ideal that we work towards. And I think learning how to love ourselves unconditionally helps us move closer to it. So that's my understanding of that. But I still believe that I love some people more than I love myself, if that makes any sense. Okay, last thing I want to talk about. Okay, it's on page 30, top of page 30 in the old edition and the bottom of page 41 in the new. I agree with Justin and Renee. Loving and accepting ourselves are the ultimate acts of courage. In a society that says put yourself last, self-love and self-acceptance are almost revolutionary. I don't know if people are still taught this today, but when I was growing up, taking care of myself first was considered selfish. And that was something you really didn't want to be. And so it is an act of courage to take care of myself and love and accept myself first before I go out and be of service to anyone else. And I have to keep asking myself with that, and I ask when I'm in conversation with my higher power, why am I so afraid to love and accept myself as I am? Why is that so darn scary? Why? I don't know why I put all these conditions and reservations on that simple act of self-acceptance and self-love. Why would I don't know what I'm getting out of that. I don't know, does it mean that I have hopes that someday I will reach perfection? Is that it? That someday I hope, that perfection is even possible? So we're going to hold off on loving and accepting me now because perfection actually is possible and I should be able to achieve it. And that's just a giant lie. And we all know it's a giant lie. But somehow in my head, I think that way. That's all I've got on this chapter, you guys. We're going to open it up for sharing. See you next week.